everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of the Powerhouse, where we bring to you the powerhouses in the mitochondrial world. I'm your host, Brian Harman, and I'm joined by my co-host today, Dr. Phil Yeske. Phil, what's new with you?
No, what's new is what's old, right? It's everything that we're trying to advance. Lots of existing programming that we're, of course, always focused on making sure we're getting maximum impact from. But it's all the new stuff, right, that we're really excited about too. And here we are wrapping up World Mitochondrial Disease Week. It really came and went quite quickly this year.
Yeah, what a busy week it was, just following the activity in our social media channels. Of course, our good friend Jack Black kicked it off for us with a special shout out. Always nice when friends with that type of reach are sharing about mitochondrial disease. But then the real bread and butter of awareness, our patient families, sharing across all these channels, really inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always great, right, to watch those messages go by. So many heartfelt messages, and the passion behind them, and as you said, inspiring in the end.
Well, and as an organization, we know we're not alone in sharing awareness. It was really neat to see this truly was a global effort. Our friends at the International Mito Patients Group lighting up buildings around the globe and sharing important content with their communities as well too. And it's a time just for everybody to come together to support this.
Yeah, it's really neat to see it grow year over year, right? We really are raising awareness, and by raising awareness, that translates into greater knowledge of the space, more research in the space, ultimately more dollars, funds coming into the space to advance the mission. So it's important work.
Well, I hope what we were able to accomplish at UMDF was demonstrating impact of the organization. It's a time of the year that we're hyper focused on that, so that our donor community and our patient community understand the real impact of supporting UMDF and delivering the very programs that we talk about on this show. Sharing patient stories is always paramount to building awareness, because in the end, it's about the patient families we serve. These are real kids, real adults faced with this disease, and then ultimately educating the world. And it's, as I think about today's guest and think about the prospect of building awareness and building the brand around mitochondrial disease, and specifically for today around Leber's Hereditary Optic Neuropathy, LHON, we have an awareness stalwart with today's guest, with Lissa Poincenot.
There she is.
There she is. Let me give a little introduction to Lissa here. More than a decade ago, Lissa's son, Jeremy, went from being fully sighted to legally blind. Lissa was determined to find out why this happened. Her sheer determination led her to not only find answers for her own family, but also those who are in the Leber's Hereditary Optic Neuropathy, or LHON, community. She is recognized as the go-to person in connecting the scientific and medical community to patient families with LHON. Please join me in welcoming to the Powerhouse, Lissa Poincenot. Hi, Lissa. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Lissa.
Hey, Brian. Hi, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Well, as I was saying in our introduction, all this talk about awareness this past week, and boy, you have your badge of building awareness. If we give out badges and have a full sash, yours is certainly full, but that's the one that's sitting at the top.
Well, I've been doing a lot of work over the years trying to raise awareness for LHON, and it's a job.
Well, we're really interested in diving into that a little bit today, and I think we need to start from the very top. One of the challenges we have in the mitochondrial disease community, of course, is we go around and we present and we try to connect new people to understand the disease and build awareness, and we get that mito what question mark. Yeah. And I had to think, Lissa, in the LHON community, you're faced with the same challenge. So I love to just get the platform first to help us kind of understand LHON what and how you answer that question.
I mean, I just tell people that LHON is something that comes out of nowhere into your family and turns your world upside down. It is a situation where you likely don't know that you carry a mutation, and then one day somebody in your family on your maternal bloodline starts to go, things are a little blurry. And there's sort of a journey, a very quick, sudden, devastating journey where you go from blurry to legally blind almost overnight. I mean, it's a matter of weeks, if not months. And it's sudden, it's frightening, and it affects the individual who has the vision loss, and it affects their entire family.
Well, certainly
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, as you mentioned, these are mitochondrial DNA abnormalities that result in LHON. They're most certainly mitochondrial diseases, but different from so many of our other mitochondrial disease patients, in that they may not self-identify that way, or even clinically, because of the impact to vision primarily. It's usually neuro-ophthalmologists, right, that they're visiting, who may not be thinking about mitochondrial disease either.
You're right. It's for me, at least, it was very much of a two-step journey where in the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, I felt like I was journeying into the LHON community, and I was learning what is LHON itself. And I was vaguely aware, as you said, that
Right.
the root cause was a mitochondrial mutation, but what did that mean? I really didn't understand, and didn't focus much on it. And it really wasn't until about 5 years into my family's journey with LHON that I came to a UMDF conference and realized the bigger scope, the bigger scale, and how we fit into the broader community. So it was kind of one big learning process, and then a second for me.
Right.
Lissa, I'm hoping you can take us back to the beginning of that journey. Talk to us a little bit about life before diagnosis and then diagnosis.
Sure. I mean, for me, life before diagnosis was like what I perceive as a typical normal life. I mean, I lived a long, rich, full life, had the opportunity to attend Princeton and study politics, and go to UCLA and get an MBA. And I had a long career in marketing in a variety of industries. And I had 3 teenage kids, and I thought, hey, I have this all figured out, the working mom thing and the 3 teenagers thing. And it was going pretty well. And my kids were 19, 16, 13. And then one day my 19-year-old was at college. He was a sophomore, and he's like, Mom, things are a little blurry. I think I need to see an eye doctor. And I'm like, yeah, it's been a year since you went to one. I'll set you up when you come home for Thanksgiving. And he came home for Thanksgiving, and he went to see the optometrist, and boom, that's when life changed 100%. And we went from, a family who'd been blessed not to have any particular challenges usual, to all of a sudden, we had someone who had sudden onset loss of vision. And not only was it blurry, but when he covered one eye, he couldn't see the eye chart at all. And so the optometrist started saying, things. Needless to say, that meant, Mom suddenly was in the optometrist's office, and he's talking about things like, well, I don't think your son has a brain tumor. Like, that didn't sound real good.
No.
And then he started throwing out other possibilities, and I'm like, how do we rule this out? And what else could it be? And, we started down this diagnostic odyssey of, is it optic neuritis, which could mean MS? Is it neuromyelitis optica? And do we treat with steroids? It should get better if it's optic neuritis. Well, it didn't. Well, then is it second eye starts to fail? Well, is it neuromyelitis optica? So they put a port in his jugular and started doing plasma exchange to try and protect him from that. But it wasn't that. So ultimately, we figured out that it was, did a lot of online searching for what could possibly cause sudden onset, painless loss of central vision, first in one eye and then the other. And it was pretty clear that it had to be LHON. But because it's so rare, the local doctors didn't see it that way. So that's when mom went into mama bear vote mode. And I'm like, okay, how, put that education to use. And fortunately, there's an internet now. Back in the day when you had to go into the library and search. But I just went searching, trying to figure out, who are the experts on this. And fortunately, I'm in San Diego, and one of the world's experts is in Los Angeles. And so I was fortunate. So then it shifted from what is it to what do you do about it?
How quickly did you get to genetic testing, Lissa?
So the local clinicians didn't want to do genetic testing. When I first said to the local neurologist that I thought it was LHON, he didn't want to do the genetic testing for it because he said it's too rare and there's not much you can do about it anyway. So he tested for everything else first. But when I got up to Los Angeles and met with a ocular genetics expert, he very quickly started the test, and 3 weeks later we had the results.
Yeah, this is a barrier that still exists today, not just for LHON, for many mitochondrial disease patients. It's within the clinical community still a reluctance to move to genetic testing as an early part of the diagnostic odyssey, but rather almost, well, we've tried to figure everything else out, we might as well do genetic testing now, which is really backwards. And we have a lot of work to do to improve upon that.
Lissa, I'm so grateful for you to share your perspective in those early days of diagnosis, and it's great to hear how you were feeling, your thoughts around that time. And I'm curious with your son, as a young man, getting from that first phone call through this journey. Talk to us a little bit about his experience for that.
His experience was quite similar to many in the LHON community, meaning he was devastated. Yeah. He thought his life was over. He thought that, there is not a real positive view of blindness in the world. And there's also not a lot of clarity around the word blind. Like, what does it mean if you're going to have the vision loss that comes with LHON? People often think that means zero vision. If you're blind, right, you have zero vision. Well, with LHON, you don't usually have zero vision. But then you start saying terms like, well, he's vision impaired. Well, vision impaired sounds like you could put on glasses, or you'd kind of be, well, it's a lot worse than that. So I personally use the term legally blind, which people have no idea what it means, but they know it's not completely blind, but it's probably worse than vision impaired, but they don't know. But then they ask questions. So anyways, he feared complete blindness and was sort of pleased to learn that wasn't what it was going to be. And he was also fortunate to have a doctor who knew a lot about it, who coached him and said, look, you've got 1.2 million optic nerve fibers. Some of them will not survive what you're going through right now, but some of them will. And the more of those that you preserve, the more vision you'll have for the rest of your life. So your question is how much vision going forward, and the answer is some of that lies in your hands and some of it is your fate, and you can control some and not all. So think about the fact that you're in a fraternity and you're drinking a lot and doing other things that people that age do that could harm their mitochondria. So he had to wrestle with lifestyle choices that would impact his visual outcome, and he had to think about living with the vision he had. I should explain that what usually happens with LHON, I'm doing it wrong, but if you put your hands in front of your face, the central part is a big blur, and what's around it he still has. So it's weird because he said to me, Mom, I wish I didn't have many friends in college because I pass people on the walk at school and they'll say hi and I don't know who they are, I can't see them. He's like, if I had no friends, then nobody would bother me. So he had to, and it all happens really, really fast. So I found a psychologist who happened to be blind himself, and it was awesome because he helped Jeremy realize that blindness is just a thing. It doesn't define who you are. It doesn't change who you are. It adds a dimension of, you have to do things a little bit differently, a lot differently sometimes. You have to listen to your books on audio. You have to learn to navigate spaces without being able to see them very well. Your social environment is different. There's just a lot of adaptations, but nobody's sick, nobody's dying. It's just blindness, and I'm putting air quotes on it because it's extreme and it's profound. So anyways, to answer your question, he went into what I felt was he went into an emotional abyss. And my sense was, as a mother, my job was to get him to the other side of the abyss as quickly as I could with as few bruises and scars as possible. So that's where I was sort of on a mission to learn, how is he going to get through school successfully? What tools and equipment is out there? What resources? What can we do to make this a great, fun, interesting, rich life? And then at the same time, how can we help, drive for a treatment or a cure? So,
and for so many others, I want to head into that direction, Lissa. I mean, to hear your story, the pathway to diagnosis, the journey, but then how you turn that into Mom on a Mission, and not just for your own case with your family, but for all the families that are on this LHON journey. So I want to talk about Mom on a Mission. And, I wrote in my show notes before I started, literally in my notes here, it says, this is a mom who created a movement. And that's not an overstatement, right? This is truly a hallmark of your work, and something we at UMDF through our partnership are so grateful for, to have volunteers at the charge doing that. So I want to talk about that journey, Lissa's journey in creating a movement. And when I think about your background, and we've had conversations about this before, think about your background and what it takes to galvanize people, what it takes to make sure you have all the information at your fingertips, and then to take that to a level of magnitude that can impact so many. So I want to start from the beginning of that. Take me from Mom creates a movement and how the early days of that started.
It was super organic. It was not highly planned or thought out. It was just plunge in and kind of swim your way to the edges and figure out what works. And when it works, do more of it. And when it doesn't work, do less of it. I was super fortunate to just be introduced to people who had been on this path before, and I talked to them and tried to get as much out of them as I could, whether it was a face-to-face meeting, a phone call, social media. Everyone's story informed how I would approach it, how I could help my family approach it. So I was fortunate there. I found one person who's great guy in the community, John Dater. He's in Rhode Island, and he's a clinical psychologist now, got his PhD in psychology. And I hunted him down, called him up and said, help, how do I help my son get through this? And he told me, and he was so forthcoming with his thoughts, ideas, and perspective. And then I reached out to another person and another, and everybody was so willing and open and helpful. And then I was super fortunate also because, as I said, Dr. Alfredo Sadoun is just up the road in LA. So I would come into every appointment with my long list of questions, and he'd answer them all. And not every patient has an LHON expert nearby or willing to take the time to answer, but I did. So I would share that with people. And then even coincidentally, Dr. Nancy Newman, another huge expert in LHON, coincidentally was a college classmate of mine at Princeton.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. So I saw her name on a paper I was reading. I'm like, wait a minute, I know who that is. So I contacted her and I just said, help. What should I do? What can I do? And she was the one who said, look, Lissa, at the time there were no clinical trials underway, but she said one day there will be. And when there are, we'll need patients. So please make friends, keep track of your friends. And when there are clinical trials, these people you'll be able to help make connections and let people know about what might be appropriate for them. So with an eye to that, I started making a lot of friends and keeping, the information. And I created the LHON.org website where I tried to take the information I'd gotten from all these conversations and doctors and various people and put it into a website, because all my friends at work would say, Lissa, you should write a book. I'm like, books get old, they're on shelves, people have to pay for them.
Yeah.
So I created, I figured, and I was learning every day. So I created the LHON.org website and just put everything that I found, into it so that people could find it, and, Blair LHON logo, and just, tried to help people find it and then put information. And then I would talk to people and I would try to help them, but then talking to them helped me. And people would say to me afterwards, oh my gosh, you're an angel. Thank you. How do I thank you? And I said, just pay it forward, pay it forward, pay it forward.
Yeah.
Because people had helped me and I helped the people. And then, and that's what's been so fun about this, is everybody who's on this journey realizes exactly what I did. It's like they or their family member plunges into an abyss with no awareness, no knowledge, and they needed to know everything yesterday, because this is not a slow progressing thing. This is catastrophic. And so you need a lot of information, and you need it quickly, and you need someone to tell you there is another side of that abyss. I found a few people who pointed that out to me, and I hung on to them.
Yeah.
Then tried to find more people and shine a light on them, because people need to have that hope that, a lot of people hope that there's a treatment or a cure, but there's also the hope that whether there's a treatment or a cure or not, a person with this situation can live a very full, rich, wonderful life. So it's
finding ways to ease that. We talk a lot about our number one audience is what I describe as the panicked parent. Exactly what you're describing. They're hearing that for the first time, and they're craving information. They're craving connection and resources. And I think a lot of what our role at UMDF is to find ways to, wherever we can, to ease those moments for the panicked parents. And Phil, I think a lot about what I hope is a bright spot of the good work that Lissa has done in the LHON community is the connection to UMDF as a home for the good work Lissa has been doing. And maybe we could talk a little about some of the partnerships we've been able to strike together in the LHON community.
Yeah, I didn't know much about LHON when I came on to staff in 2013, 2014, and Chuck made the introduction to Lissa, and I learned so much from Lissa, just as she described it. And with my responsibilities for thinking about the research mission of UMDF, Lissa was a very natural partner to say, okay, what can we do from a research perspective that really helps this portion of the mitochondrial disease community? That was one aspect. The other was, how do we begin to bring the LHON community closer to the rest of the mitochondrial disease community? There's very obvious differences in their forum, I'll say, of mitochondrial disease versus many others, but there's still so much to be shared, right? And that's when we began thinking about hosting sessions at the UMDF meeting dedicated to LHON, and look for opportunities to mingle with all the clinicians, researchers, and other patient families there. So it's been just such a wonderful collaboration from the earliest days. And Lissa, I don't know what you'd estimate at this point, but I'm guessing you've touched the lives of thousands of LHON families around the world, and that's just an amazing accomplishment.
Well, and the best part of it is that I've had the privilege of touching literally thousands of families, and the families have so much desire to sustain it, and to continue it, and to find deepening connections. There's just so much interest in finding new and deeper ways to build connections, to share information, to crowdsource pathways forward in living with this. I know, Brian, you mentioned, the panicked parents, but one aspect of LHON that's so interesting and challenging is it isn't just something where children become affected and it's the parents. It could be a panicked parent. It could also be the panicked individual who's an
Right. Panic
adult.
patient. Right.
It could be their spouse. It could
Right.
be their, loved one. It could be their father. It could be that's apparently sorry. But there's just so many ways you could approach it. And that's one of the complexities. And I'm sure this is part of the whole, Mito field also. But, are you dealing with someone who's trying to stay in school? Are you dealing with someone who's trying to get through the college experience? Is it someone who thinks they have to go back and get retrained?
Yeah, different needs
in their job, and trying to help the person whatever way they're coming into this problem, creates all these sub communities and micro communities and topic areas and affinity groups, and then there's always the but I want to talk to someone near me. So we have the national conference, which is awesome when we can have it in person, but then you can also, do it on Zoom, and you can get or you can do things locally, and we can get the New England community and the California community and, different communities connecting, as well as people around the world.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a little bit about the research in the space. Again, one of the first things we worked on together was facilitating, a couple of relatively modest grants with Dr. Sadoun, and that really led to some interesting results. And I think about it, one of them was addressing some of the most common misperceptions, right, about LHON, that it's just a young man's disease. I remember hearing that, and that's not necessarily the case at all. What are the factors that may impact the life with the disease, the progression of the disease? And ultimately, it really led to an important training opportunity for someone that you and I now work with very closely as a young thought leader in this space too. Maybe you could just touch on those a little bit, Lissa.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. It's been really fascinating to work with researchers who have been extremely open to the patient perspective. Dr. Rustam Karanja, who has trained with Dr. Alfredo Sadoun in LA and is now in Ottawa, Canada, and is on the UMDF SMAB,
Yes.
and is also on the LHON Canada group. So he's really involved with the patient community throughout North America and is obviously connected with other researchers around the world. But we really dug into the demographic information. And it's one of those things where there's a common belief that LHON is a young man's disease, but all these people I'm talking to, a lot of them are women, and a lot of them are not young. And it's one of those things where I knew from personal experience and anecdotal evidence that this is not just a young man's disease. This is a disease that can absolutely impact you at any age of your life. I would talk to people who would say, oh, I've passed the age, I'm no longer at risk, or they won't test me for it, I'm a woman. No, you don't understand. 25% of the affected individuals who are part of our global community, and we have 5,000 people on Facebook. I've got 10,000 contacts. We've got a couple thousand that we email blast to. We've got so many people we're talking to. We've got a large sample size. And 25% are female. That's not a young man's disease when 25% are female. Right. And then within the males, there's a huge peak between ages 14 going up to 20 and back down to 26. So it's understandable that peak is where the emphasis lies. But you got a really long tail in other directions, younger and older. So again, going back to your diagnostic honesty problem, a lot of people who are female or children or older, they really have trouble getting diagnosed. And yet in this collaboration, we were able to publish data that makes very clear that this is a disease that should be thought of as painless, sudden loss of central vision, usually in one eye than the other. And genetically test based on that. Don't get caught up in the historical anomaly of in my experience, at least, there's I just welcomed somebody last week who's a woman who's 47, the week before a man who's 61, the week before that it's a woman who's 74. I mean, it's
have you been able to translate that into your awareness efforts, Lissa? We talk about that too. We make these assumptions and we build our marketing and our campaigns and the way we talk about things based on those assumptions. And I'm curious how you've woven that into your awareness campaigns.
I mean, I certainly communicated about it frequently as I am here. I've talked about it at conferences, and as you know, thanks to the good work of Cliff and your crew at UMDF, we've been able to capture on video all of our LH1 conferences over the years, and I've absolutely made that communicated that information over the years in various forums. So, but the more we communicate it, the more we help people.
Yeah, something to keep in mind is, I don't think we plugged it earlier, but we are heading into Blindness Awareness Month in October as well too. So it's always good for us to have the those special tidbits, the things that we want to debunk, make sure that we're out there sharing good information. I want to go back a little bit to, we talk about again, building the movement. And I know a lot of the work you're doing, Lissa, right now is focusing on training, recruiting, building that network of advocates that do what you do, right? We've talked a lot about the service that you've provided to the LHON community, but part of your service you provide is finding others to go out there and beat that drum.
And I want to hit by a bus.
Right. This is also a plug, a plea, right? We need more folks out there that are thinking the way that you are, Lissa. And I know there's been some growth in that as well too. So, on that topic of getting things done, how you get people to rally and then get them to rally for the cause. Talk to us a little bit about that.
You're right. A couple of years ago, I really took seriously the concern, as Phil said, of, what happens if Lissa gets hit by a bus. I've done a lot on my own, because who else is crazy enough to give up their day job and do nothing but this, just because you want to. But, for me, it's a mother's mission, so I do. So I did what I usually do, which is I collaborate. I like working in teams. I like collaborating. And I have a friend who's been with me on this journey, and we talk a lot about things. And she said, look, this is what you need to do. Identify what you do and identify what the tasks are and articulate it, lay out a plan and show folks what you do and invite them to fit in where they want to fit in. So at the 2019 conference, I laid out an org chart, so to speak, of what's done. So there's sort of a research scientific pillar. There's an education pillar. There's a community collaboration pillar, and all of it is sustained by organizational strength, whether it's financial or it's our international collaborations. So working on the science research side, we created a science team, and we've been meeting monthly pretty much for the last couple of months. And it's, not everybody thinks it's fun to read scientific papers on LH1.
Phil loves it.
Right. And so do I. So that's, so there are others in the community. Yeah. So there's, I don't know how well you know Lissa Thompson, but for instance, she's been part of the team and she's amazing. She is very involved in building the LHON Plus community, and she's developed relationships with researchers working on LHON and the various mito-like symptoms that some people in our community have, whether they're affected or carriers. And she's been she's been advocating, talking about building that community, and is very much a part of that science and research team, because we like talking about and digging into the papers and finding other people who are equally interested so that can sustain and go forward. So we have that pillar. And then in the education side, we've got Molly Garone. And Molly, a lot of people in the LH1 community know, she came up to me at a conference a few years ago when I said, anyone want to help? And she was like, yeah, me. And yeah, she's awesome. And her dad has been affected for decades, and they never talked about what it was. But one day she got curious and found LHON.org and dragged her family to the conference. And her dad's just amazing. Her whole family's amazing. She's amazing. So she's been helping build the community and work on various projects. And she's driving the education piece. We got a grant. We've gotten 2 grants so far, thanks to Beth's help, within UMDF, and we've gotten a couple of Global Genes grants to work on financial literacy and advocacy, and she's working on that grant with us and other educational, because so much of what we're trying to do is educate. We created a carrier checklist a couple of years ago, where we laid out what should a carrier know, so that if they, one day have blurry vision, what are the steps? What can you do now so that when that day comes, if it comes, you're ready? So she prepared that, pulled that together. So she's overseeing the whole educational piece, and we're trying to break down what that entails. And then there's the whole community collaboration piece, where, like I said earlier, we try to pull people together based on geography and then based on shared interests. And so we've got all these Zoom events going on, whether they're monthly, quarterly, every other month. And that Jessica Loomer was at the 2013 conference. She's been leading our monthly LHON Live calls, co-leading them since then. And then over the last couple of years, we've been actively, dividing it into pieces, and we have leaders in various areas. And then we just had our leader call last night, kind of, okay, what's working, what's not working, what can we do more of, what would help the group? So yeah, we've got just finding what gets people interested and then giving them the opportunity to fit in, and they contribute and they get something from contributing, and they meet people and, learn something. And at the end of the day, this is a very isolating disease.
Yeah.
People really feel alone.
Yeah.
And, it starts with, you can't access your phone, you can't access the computer, but you can if you learn how. So learning it from other people matters. So again, the whole power of community, just, it's just fun. We have, again, we find what you like, and, Phil, we wouldn't have you do the one part and we wouldn't have Jessica read the articles, right? We find what people like to do and let them do it. And it works really well.
Inspired by these bright spots of collaboration, and your resolve to find more, Lissa, right? Like that effort never ends, right? And until we have treatments and cures, that's how we look at things every day at UMDF. And I think about just you were talking about some of the collaboration from a fundraising standpoint. We're really proud to host the LHON Project Fund at UMDF. So the folks who are interested in supporting the LHON community and these efforts can always find that on UMDF. And we work very closely together to help set an agenda of how to best put those dollars to work. And that's where collaboration for us with leaders like you are so important, because boots on the ground out there understanding how this is. And I think Phil would be the first one to say, I think he did already say it on this call, that you're the one who's informing us, and keeping that frequent, thoughtful communication to me is just another important piece of developing leaders. And I think about what you've really done here, Lissa, for this community. I think the real legacy is what you're doing right now. It's developing those slate of leaders, and how important that is for this community, for the mito community overall. We're truly inspired by that. I wanted to ask you, as a springboard off of that, there's something, when I went to my first symposium and I walked into the LHON rooms that we had, and I saw 100+ strong LHON community members there. And not to say that our entire mito community is not special, but there is something like this community special vibe in LHON. And I wanted to hear a little bit more from you on that. As you've gotten to know families, and if you've seen folks rise up and advocate, what are some of those qualities that you're seeing from the community overall that's really making this community special?
I think one of the things that is powerful in the LHON community is the genetic inheritance pattern of LHON means you can't walk away from it. Everybody, thinks that I do what I do for my son Jeremy because he's affected, but it's so much broader than that, right? You get the LHON. If my son had gotten all the other diagnoses they talked about, I would have had to focus on him, and I would have had to focus on him.
Right.
But when it was LHON, it was like, I got to focus not only on him, but his two siblings. And then my daughter, I want her to feel comfortable having kids. And, I'm also at risk. And my brother is at risk. And, everyone who's in the LHON community has to come to grips with the very clear nature of the LHON genetics, which are that a mother will pass the mutation to all of her children. And thus, if she looks backwards, she got it from her mother, who got it from her mother. And you can quickly see on a whole maternal bloodline a whole lot of risk out there. So you have to wrestle with not only the needs of the individual who's lost vision, but you have to wrestle with how are you going to live with the understanding that every other person on the maternal bloodline in your family carries that same risk. And, everybody copes in their own way, right? Some people look at it and say, I don't want to think about it. And they ignore it. And that's perfectly okay. That's certainly their prerogative and what they might choose to do. I'm not that way. I tell everybody on the maternal bloodline what their risks are and how they can reduce their risk and why they might choose to. And then at the end of the day, it's up to them what they want to do.
It's about educating and informing, right? And
Right.
then everyone has to make decisions for themselves.
Right. But I think that is a strong bonding. I think we talk about the whole LH1 community as a family. And I think that's a piece of why we're so strongly a family, because it's got this, it really is. I mean, we had a call the other day and we were on Zoom naming ourselves, and the affected person was talking, and then their sibling was referring to themselves as so-and-so's brother, sister. And we had like 3 of them, but it's a family affair, so to speak. It's complicated for the good and the bad. So that's one piece of it. And I think another reason why the community is bonded so tightly is, again, I don't know if this comes across right, but we don't fit anywhere else. And what I mean by that is, we're well accepted and included and part of the mitochondrial community, but our needs and our issues are different, as you said. We don't, at some level, our people who are affected are legally blind. So some of the resources that we can and should get come from the blind community, but we don't fit there neatly either, because in most cases, somebody who's blind either becomes affected late in life, and so they've kind of finished their career and they need activities of daily living support, or they're affected at birth, young childhood, and they go through the school system and they give you the tools and the techniques you need. But if you're like my son, he was a sophomore in college, and we went to the Disability Resource Center and they showed us all the great stuff they had, and we're like, great, how do you use it? And they're like, well, don't you know? Because most students who show up there know. No, well, where do we learn that? I don't know. It turns out, there's a voc rehab. Well, who knew? I didn't know there was voc rehab. So it's like you're constantly having to find all this stuff, and you don't quite. And then you talk to the people in the blindness community, and they think, well, if it onsets midlife, it's usually gradual, like retinitis pigmentosa or Stargardt's, and which gradually progresses over years and decades before you're legally blind. Now, this happens like all at once. So the blindness community embraces LHON, but they don't quite know what to do with us either. So again, I think that's part of why people get into our community, and it's like, oh my gosh, okay, these people get it.
Right.
I'm a sighted individual, but I can't see very well. Do I want to use a cane? But I'm still sighted, right? I'm still in denial about this vision loss, or maybe I have enough vision that I don't need that, but some do. So it's just complicated. And like I said, you get into this community where everybody gets it, and everyone just goes, I'm home. These are my people. They get me. They're dealing with the same issue. So I think those are kind of the 2 key.
And at a minimum, the goal is to get them on the path that you forged, but also helping guide folks to kick down more doors with you, right? I think that's, again, the real brilliance of all this is that kind of take care of business attitude that you've brought to this community. And I think it's something that we Phil brought this up earlier. So importantly, the influence you've had on thousands of of patient families for getting educated and understanding that path, but also now helping to continue to forge that path. And certainly it's what we're most grateful for, Lissa, is the time that you put into that. Knowing that you spent, whether it was your intention or thought from the get-go that that's what was going to happen or not, it certainly has. Knowing that you've influenced so many people, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you, and our viewers, I'm sure, would love to hear the influencers in your life, the powerhouses in your life. I love to just hear that perspective from you of what has moved you over this time.
For anyone that knows me and who knows the journey I've been through, it wouldn't be a surprise to hear me say that my son Jeremy is definitely an influencer. Yeah. And an inspiration. I mean, he's become a professional inspirational speaker, and he's taken his experiences with this, and he started just trying to raise money to do LHON research. He went to the fraternities and the sororities on campus at San Diego State and tried to persuade them to give their money to support this process, and he was very good at it, and he had a lot of fun doing it, and just ended up doing it more and more and more. He ended up soon after onset of vision loss, he learned to play blind golf, and he became a world blind golf champion. And people would say to me, "Oh, you must be so proud." And I'm like, "I am. I'm very proud, but I don't care about him winning. I mean, I do. When he hears this,
well, we want to hear more about it.
Yes. I'm very proud that he's a world blind golf champion. But honestly, what I'm more proud of is that he will work with get him in front of a bunch of young blind kids and with a golf club, and he will inspire them, and he will show them that he's blind, so he's happy, he's traveled, he has a rich full life, he makes being blind fun. And I think that takes away a lot of fear that people have about it, and whether it's people with LH1 or any form of blindness, I think he takes away that stigma, which is out there in a lot of cases, and I think he does a good job doing it, and he connects with people. So he's obviously one, but so many other influential people. I've mentioned that I'm super fortunate to have had the leaders that, Dr. Alfredo Sadun and Dr. Nancy Newman, whom I consider, really close friends, and because they're brilliant, but they don't put up any kind of barrier. They've just, like, from day one, it's like, "Oh, Lissa, you're on the team. Okay, here's, how can I help you and how can you help us?" And it's like, "Oh, cool." Because I've talked to a lot of people in other rare disease communities, and they don't tell the same story. So I don't take it for granted that those were the first two leaders that I met. And then they introduced me to people like Valerio Corelli in Italy, and Patrick Uiman in the UK, and Chiara Lamorgia in Italy, and Rustam Crunch up in Canada. And then, we've had so many people who are more of the mito docs, so to speak, Amel Kara and Amy Goldstein, and Andrea Grotman, and so many people and then Ann Caramello, all these people who are devoting time, energy, attention to issues around LHON, LHON plus. And again, they've looked at the patient community as partners, collaborators, which makes it fun to work with them. And then, obviously, the whole crew at UMDF. I mean, Dan Wright, I met him, former chairman of the board, whose daughter has a rare LH1 mutation before she passed, unfortunately. But, he took me under his wing and said, "Oh, you've got LH1, let's talk." And, just brought me into the community, and, just the generosity, or, just so many, Chuck Mullen, Kara. I mean, just people who could have said, "I'm busy, this isn't what we deal with every day." No, people who embraced and said, "Okay, what can we do? How do we do more of it?" I mean, even you, Phil. I mean, you, Phil, coming to Nanos with me and talking to all the neuro-ophthalmologists, and then from that, realizing that Nancy Newman would
Oh.
be great on SMAD. I mean, just people taking chances and finding connections, and just people that are really capable, but also real people and want to help. It's amazing.
It's testament to what has made campaigns and movements tick for all organizations, right? It comes down to people, the people we're serving, and the people who serve. And for that, Lissa, we're just incredibly grateful for the good work you've put in. And I know, again, I leave inspired. You get a certain level of energy from you when you talk, right? I mentioned earlier with this little mantra of like, let's kick down more doors. And that's our goal. Wake up every day. Like, there's something to fix, and we'll fix one thing. There'll be a new problem, and we're going to go fix that one. We're going to kick down the next door. And you've heard me say it to you, and I'll say it again so everybody hears it. We can't do it without volunteer leaders like yourself.
Very true.
So we're delighted to have you at the helm for that.
Thank you.
Well, it's been an inspiring conversation. Lissa, we're so proud to have you on our team, and delighted that you joined us today on the Powerhouse to share a little bit about the good work you're doing. And as a reminder, where can our listeners find more information on LHON? Outside the UMDF website, you can go there, but where else can they connect with you?
The LHON.org website is a great place to start, and there's a contact form, and anybody who fills out a contact form on the LHON.org website will immediately get the opportunity to join the fun that we have serving this community and driving it forward.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lissa.
Oh, thank you.
Phil, as we typically do when we download these conversations, I just think of themes, and collaboration is a word that's easily can just be assigned to lip service. We should collaborate. We should collaborate, right? But it takes actually doing things like this, and finding people and connecting them, and lowering our ego and our guard to do what's best. And Lissa is a real shining star of that.
She is a doer, no question about it. She walks the walk and backs up the talk. It's such a joy to partner and collaborate with someone like Lissa, so passionate about it. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that hit by the bus strategy doesn't come to play.
Right.
We have. There's so much more, right, to still be done. And Lissa and I interact on a regular basis. We're doing a road mapping exercise right now, just thinking about the state of research and what we know about LHON. In many ways, right, as she described it, it's a well understood form of mitochondrial disease. But like anything, the more we learn, we're peeling back more layers. Like, maybe we don't fully understand that. There's more research that needs to be done. And all of this informs all the elements of our mission, right? But with a particular emphasis on developing treatments and cures. In some ways, the LHON community is like the tip of the spear in this clinical era, because there have been therapeutic clinical trials for addressing LHON. There's an approved drug in Europe, not in the United States, for LHON. There's gene therapy trials undergoing. So personalized medicine, it's a great learning place for the mitochondrial disease community at large. And Lissa's a big part of all the successes.
Yeah, wherever we can leverage some battering rams, we're going to take it, right? Where that can impact the rest of the community as well, too. And so many, today was a leadership lesson for me as well, too. And it's a topic that I'm always real keen to educate myself on. I find myself listening to leadership podcasts, reading leadership books, and you can get all that information from a book, but watch it in action from real leaders. And the result is the product, right? I mean, that's the signal of strong leadership.
It sticks with you in a different way, right?
Yeah.
When you just, you hear it, you see it in action, it maps differently in your brain than just, reading a book or listening to a podcast.
I was listening to one
leader.
The other day. This was the head wrestling coach at Ohio State University, Tom Ryan, an excellent leader to check out. And he had this quote that caught me, that pain causes us to run or it causes us to grow. And I think about, this isn't just Lissa, these are all the patient families.
Yeah.
It's the folks who have said, let's get it done. they are in that camp of let this help us grow.
Yeah, I
And,
think, one of the things that just always resonates with me is that, whether it's the LHON portion of our community or any of the myriad of other syndromes that all come under this umbrella of mitochondrial disease, people want to rally around the most vulnerable members of our community.
Yes.
And that's so inspiring in and of itself, right? I mean, everybody's on this journey in their own way, but it's how do we rally to help the ones that are maybe new and coming in, most vulnerable, or in a tough part of life and most vulnerable. And that's what Lissa demonstrates over and over again.
Well, it needs to center us every single day. And I know Lissa gave so many great shout outs to the staff at UMDF, of which we're most grateful. Even you, Phil, getting a shout out as well.
I know. Wow, that's nice to hear.
I just had to make Lissa laugh one more time when she tunes into this. Special thanks again to our guest today, Lissa Poincenot. Stay connected with us. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch this episode, all of our Powerhouse on YouTube. Of course, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. It's where we're sharing all this content. And until next time, everyone, go fast.